That's the roadmap.
That's it right there.
Right there.
You want everybody at your funeral to say, he was epic.
Epic.
Best adjective out there.
That's the one.
Coach Bennett hit a bomb right there. Knocked
Yeah,
it out of the ballpark. I love that.
Yeah. Too bad you can't use it on your
use
kids. No, you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have enough time now. It's
Yeah. I got 8 weeks left.
You got 8 weeks. 8 weeks to figure out how to jam that into a couple hundred kids'
I'll
mind.
use it on my own kids and parenting. Perfect. They'll be the beneficiary. That's a goodie, Ed.
Welcome to Guys Fishing Weekly. We don't just fish, we hug.
What's up, dude?
Dude, Eddie. What are you doing, bro?
Not much. You?
Chilling, man. Spring break starting.
Have you dug out of all your snow?
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly it melts around here. We got upwards close to 2 feet. It was about 18 inches easy, 1.5 feet for sure. And then 2 days later, everybody's driving around the neighborhood. It's no big deal. It's it's not all gone, but it certainly is. It melts pretty quick. A couple days of 50, 60 will do that for you. And then this week looks to be pretty good too, all in the 60s-ish.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it'll be gone before you know it.
I heard Gilpin County and other places got like 5 feet of snow.
It got trounced.
That's
some
crazy.
Places up in the mountains, yeah. I saw a report about snowpack being at or above where it should be. So that's really good for us in terms of summer droughts around here. The snowpack levels always matter. And so that dumping really helped. These spring storms are always crazy because they're like that heavy, wet snow. Right. So shoveling it is just like, oh my God, dude. People are like, why'd you get a snowblower? I'm like, I'd use it once, maybe a year. This would be the time you'd want it, but it's not worth it to get.
I mean, even still, though, when it's that heavy, it's like hard for the snowblower to even throw some of that stuff because it's just like chunky slush.
Right. So shoveling that snow just sucks. But I didn't throw my back out. I'm all good. So I got a good workout. Sweat a bunch.
Chiropractor's a little bummed out that you that you didn't, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's good. I'm looking forward to doing some fishing this week. So
spring break for you, baby.
Yeah, that's right. The Buffs finished second in the Pac-12 tournament. They made it to the championship game. We're stoked about that. They should be in the tournament.
Should be
with that performance.
Find out tonight.
Yep. So it's good. It's all good.
Gotta love it. Well, and then March Madness this week.
Right?
I would probably go to argue that it's the best sporting event in all of sports.
Yeah, I am. I'm a baseball junkie. You know that. My daughter plays competitive softball, so I've become a softball junkie in the last several years as well. But I love both of those college World Series. The softball and the baseball are usually my favorites, and then March Madness you can put as a 1B, or a 2 up there. But yeah, absolutely. I look forward to college stuff way more than I do. College football I watch in week in, week out, but not as much as like softball and baseball, and then basketball for sure. These are the best. But the tournament is just the NCAA March Madness tournament is just they're sitting on a gold mine. It's just beautiful in all of its aspects.
I think it's not only the sporting event, but it's just like the time of the year it happens. Everything's getting nice to be back outside. Everybody's kind of coming out of their winter hibernation. Like a lot of social events happen around March Madness, viewing parties and stuff. And it's just like, it's almost like the year kicks off with March Madness.
right?
I love it.
The good part of the year. Yeah.
Right.
The spring and summer and sunshine and all things shorts and t-shirts.
It's awesome. It's the best. Not to mention the gambling, but we won't.
That's right.
We won't take ourselves down that slippery slope.
Well, everybody's hopeful at this point. Everybody's like, oh, I'm gonna win. Yeah. Nobody's lost
for
yet.
Sure. For sure. They're like, oh, what's the buy into the pool? I want it to be bigger. I want it to be bigger.
Right.
And then
that's right.
And then 2 days in, they'll all be like, why do we do it?
Why do we do that? It's like when you're walking down to the river, you're all hopeful. I'm gonna catch 50 fish today. Yeah.
Yep.
That's great.
It's a good time of the year.
Absolutely.
Well, this week we're going to hop in and do another one of our 3 thoughts, trying out different things, see how it hits, and see what we come across in these conversations. So
sweet. All right. I love it. What do you got for your fishing one?
Part-time fisherman. So this is a little bit of a self-conscious topic, but pertains to fishing.
Yeah.
I think I am been a little self-conscious lately of my ability to get out on the water, partly where I live, partly what's going on in my life and the other adventures that I'm after, which are doing my marathoning, doing my parenting, and then, also the general starting up of this whole guys fishing weekend adventure. So just kind of something I'm battling with is how to get on the water more, how to keep that hobby alive and well in a time of a lot of change. Didn't know if you had any wise wisdom under that orange hat of yours.
Yeah. Some would argue that there's not much wise wisdom under that orange hat of mine. But certainly I think that there's an element of my passion for fishing that, whenever I get spare time or free time, that's usually where I focus it, is where's the next place I'm going fishing. And I think about that a lot just because of what it brings me. But that's not always my level of buy-in to fishing or passion for fishing. I'm a junkie, and so not everybody else is, but it doesn't lessen what fishing I think can bring to them. I get it. I get antsy when I haven't been on the water, certainly the way that I want to. So there's like periods of time when I have other things going on, namely my daughter's tournament schedule can get busy for softball and my weekends get filled up with that stuff. So summertime's always great because then I have during the week to do more fishing and my weekends get full of that stuff. But the dad stuff takes precedence. You have to go do and be with your family and do those things, and you have to sacrifice some of that time. So I think it ebbs and flows. There's times when I get to go fishing more, and there's like, hopefully this week with spring break coming up, I don't have the same spring break as my kids this year. So I'll get some time to go out on the river and do what brings that passion, right? Get that spot filled up. So, but you can find that in other ways. And I think that's your marathon running. Are you kidding me? Like, that's insane, dude. Yeah, giving yourself that kind of focus and purpose. There's always the dad, the husband, the family stuff that you have to do, and that's first and foremost in your priority list. So I would say work sometimes is doing that as well, but I have 8 weeks left. I'm done, dude. Yeah, I'm cashing out of work. That work. But you mentioned too the GFW business that we're trying to get rolling, and that brings excitement and joy to me too. And so some of this time that I have this week is not all going to be out on the river. It's going to be dedicated to doing some stuff that I haven't been able to do as much with helping you out with GFW. So that's, I think that that's totally reasonable. not to, you don't want to beat yourself up for not being out on the water, certainly. And I think that those times ebb and flow.
Yeah. I mean, I do have to continue to tell myself, the seasons of life. But
ooh, that's a good way to put that. That's a good way to put that.
There are seasons in which you can fish a lot, and there's seasons when you can't. So, it is a bummer at times not to be able to get out on the water and dream about, like, oh man, I wish I was out fishing with Reid or out in Colorado, just bushwhacking some mountain. But yeah, it's something that you just kind of have to work through.
Right. Absolutely. Balance. We talk so much about balance in life. And sometimes you're this way, sometimes you're this way. You try to keep it here, but those seasons of life take it, so that's all right. Yep. Don't beat yourself up about it, though. That's for sure.
Yeah, maybe I'll just quit the running thing and just go back to fishing.
Nah. Not until after your marathon.
I know, I got a big run coming up this week.
Nice. How far are you going to
go? 12 and a half miles this week.
Shut the front door. Are you kidding me?
So it's the last big long run of the training plan before I run the half marathon in a couple weeks. So we're getting down to the wire.
Nice.
Phase 1 of this year's plan.
Right on. Halfy. Sweet. Yep. Crush. You're gonna slay half marathons. Right on, dude.
All right. Let's hit your topic, bushwhacking.
Okay, so this came about as I've been sitting around thinking. I always get deep into my dreams of trips we want to do, and then I start to get nostalgic and think about trips we have done. I'll take out a map and start looking at stuff, places we've been, everywhere, because I have the big map that I keep and make notes in and everything from places we've been. And the bushwhacking idea that we've done often, we have shared some great memories of trudging through thickets and scraping and falling down and tripping over logs. And those kinds of experiences, all in the adventure of getting to water that maybe, if it has been fished, it hasn't been fished often.
Right.
And I think those adventurous times that we've had are some of the best and most memorable days that we've ever had on water. And there's so many through the years of our Guys Fishing Weekend, but there's a couple that come to mind for me in terms of you and I sharing some time on the water. Twice we got caught in storms where we found some coverage, I guess, that kept us maybe from, it kept us damp rather than soaked.
Right.
But you know how those winter storms, or those summer storms come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they come in quick and they can be nasty and violent, and then they're gone. And so we have been huddled under some whatever coverage we can find. But particularly, they have those moments that provide us a deepening of a friendship. Like the one for sure when we were up on this one creek and we bushwhacked it. It ended up being you and I. And we climbed up this wall that was probably 15 feet high, that we got to a point we had to go up and over. And it was, it was that we got stuck in that storm. But that moment was, I think, one that definitely deepened our friendship. The discussions we had on the water that day while we were, withstanding that storm shoulder to shoulder, which would have been pretty awkward if you were with anybody else, because we were so tightly huddled under what little structure we had to keep us from getting totally soaked. But that conversation was one that was amazing for me in terms of a bond that I shared with you and deepening our friendship. And so that was really cool.
Yeah.
You know,
I think anytime you go on those adventures that are unplanned in a way, I think there's something to be said about planned adventures too, but like the unplanned, I don't want to say catastrophe or the unplanned just challenges that come up on some adventures, I do think kind of link you together in a way where you can come back and that's always a touchstone memory in your mind with somebody else and kind of breaks the ice on a relationship forever. And so
right.
I love the bushwhacking one because the fishing in some ways is a lot easier because the fish will eat basically anything. But I also like it just because it's so pretty where you feel like you've kind of earned your way to certain places, and there's not usually a highway right alongside the river or trash floating all around. It's bushwhacking's the best, and doing it with should always do it with somebody because bears.
Right. And it's funny because there's been times when you just get lost. I get lost in the fishing and I don't even consider like how deep maybe we are in the wilderness or that that's even an option. Like I just get so excited for what's happening, with us on the water.
Right.
We've had those moments where it's just like the fishing's incredible. We caught, he ended up with the Colorado Grand Slam that day. I don't even think we realized it until after the fact. We got that to the guys bitching about where we'd been all day. Which, and again, and speaking of that authenticity piece, we just started fishing and it ended up like, hey, where is everybody? Oh, well, I guess whatever. So they happen like that. And in a time when, I was thinking about it too from, Colorado, even when you go hike to a high mountain lake, the hiking trails get full of people at certain, the tourism here is big and people come here to hike and do those things. And so getting away from people, which I like to do, I don't want to stand shoulder to shoulder with people in, big rivers with big fish in them. I'd much rather bushwhack to go find something to get away from that. Because that's the part of fishing, I think, that's such a major piece of me is that solitude piece. So that's a big deal. So I love, so the adventure side of it, the bushwhacking, that was just something that we've been committed to doing quite a bit of, and it always seems to pay off. I don't think there's ever been a time when we bushwhacked and it sucked. Maybe while we're hiking and tripping over stuff, it sucks, but the end result usually makes it worth it.
One trip that I always think of when, well, not always, but when you wrote bushwhack here, I think of the time that we were all trying to hike up to go fish for greenbacks up way. I don't even know where it was. I can't remember now. But there was a trail and we had mapped out the trail of being like this long to get up to this lake to fish for greenbacks. And you, Tom, and I were like, this trail, we've been hiking on this trail for so long. Like, let's just cut up this hill and we'll just follow the river up this hill and we'll just make it to the lake. I'm not going to follow this trail. Like, the trail goes off this way. There's no way I'm going to go way left away from the lake. And we were in there like crawling through vines and ferns and everything prickly.
Poison ivy.
Who knows what we were crawling through. And the only way you could cast was like bow and arrow casts underneath fallen limbs. And we were catching fish in there, but we never made it to the lake.
Did not make it to the lake. The shortcut did not work.
Did not work. Following the river, not always the best approach.
I just remember when we were done with that day of fishing, I don't think I ever slept as well as I did.
The other part of it that I remember is when we got back to the trail, admitting defeat that we weren't going to make it to the lake, seeing a couple people who stayed on the trail, and we found out that we got off the trail only like maybe a half a mile shy of the lake, and they made it up there.
It was that long. I think it was a quarter mile.
And they had caught stuff, and yeah. But
yeah.
Bushwhacking always has a fun memory in my book.
So good. GF Dumb sense of adventure right there. Yep. So good. All right. Next up.
This one I have written down resume.
Yeah. Tell me about resume.
So we're not going to be giving business advice here on this podcast. I'm not sure we're qualified.
No.
But this is an interesting idea that I came across in a book that I recently read. Basically, it was on the art of small talk, something that I suck at, and I know a lot of other men probably feel the exact same way, that small talk is one of the hardest and potentially most pointless parts of communication. I don't know, is that what you feel?
Yes. Can't stand small talk.
But I actually from this book learned that it's an important stage to the connection process that I had never really imagined as being important. I always was just like, we got to get through this shit because it is terrible.
Right?
We can both see what the weather is like outside. I don't think we need to talk about it.
Right?
Okay? I think we're good.
And it can be painfully awkward sometimes.
Painfully.
Right?
Painfully.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
Nobody wants that. I think what this book taught me is, and other things I've been reading about the topic of small talk, is that the point of small talk is to find things in common with the other person. And so we do that through things that we know we're going to achieve success on, in a way, like the weather or the football game that's on the TV in front of us, or do you like the beer out of the cooler that I'm going to go to and get one? Would you like one? Things like that. Or we're constantly trying to find things that are in common, but we already kind of know those things are in common, and so they don't really lead anywhere. And so I think one of the main problems is, on top of that, is like we don't have a good inventory of things that are in our mind to talk about to try and see if they connect with other people. I think we do things like you and I fish, but I don't necessarily bring up fishing every time I go. In fact, it doesn't even necessarily come to the top of my mind every time I go to a small party barbecue where I need to talk about something. And so I always struggle with having those things to talk about. And in this book, basically, the author was talking about creating a conversational resume about yourself. So instead of having a business resume, this is just like small talk topics that you can always talk about. One thing I always think about is like having islands of safety that you can always come back to and start like a conversation about. And so a few of the interesting kind of categories that he lists as putting on in here are just one, daily life things that you have going on. These are things like, theoretically the weather, but, how's the week going? How are things with your family and spouse? How's work? Just things that are going on a weekly basis. These are easy things. You probably don't need to write them down a lot, but it is worthy of thinking about what you're willing to share so you don't kind of get locked up when it comes to this part of small talk. And the next thing would be that next step of where you're trying to really find some connection on is that their personal topics. So these are things like hobbies or passions outside of work, or like things about where you're from, or maybe favorite subjects from school, or things that you're reading about, or activities or clubs that you're involved in, things that you are passionate about talking about. And it could even be things about maybe work is just what you love. So those are two kind of things that you can find connections on. And then the other two, well, the next one is notable things. These are things in your life that are like your big achievements, big experiences that you've had. Maybe you travel a bunch and all of the different things that you've gone to see in the world, or you fish a lot and you've caught X, Y, and Z. You've been this close to catching the world record marlin. So having a lot of like notable experiences, you don't want to overdo on your notable experiences, but again, we're just trying to find ways to connect.
Right.
And then the last thing is just
right,
no bragging. And then the last thing is just current events that are going on in the world, and actually having an understanding, an opinion to a degree. You don't want to get into arguments about things, but having an understanding of what's going on in the world, from Taylor Swift to overseas conflicts, can be helpful in some situations to have at least an understanding of what's going on in the world. And I thought that just having these things and sitting down with a list of this, once a month, to kind of really have a script, and you're not going to remember all of them, but it not only does a good job of giving you things to talk about, but it also gives you a good sense of things you care about, things that give you your identity. I don't think we do enough of that as well, of just creating our own personal identity, whereas we do that with our work kind of all the time.
Right. Yeah, that's incredible value in that, I think, in terms of, especially when you're with new people, that foundational kind of, here's what I believe in, or here's what makes me me. And there's some foundational pieces in there, I think, that are really good to be able to think about before you go out or set out to do those things. I love how the resume kind of acts as that symbolic way of thinking about that. You're not necessarily selling yourself to others, but when it comes to small talk, that can be difficult, especially for introverted people, I think, like yourself. Maybe I don't struggle with it as much, but even I've been in, as an extrovert, painful, socially awkward places with small talk. And so that's a phenomenal tool to have, to think about those things. Even if I don't go out once a month necessarily and experience small talk with people, once a month, going through that resume to keep touch with what you value, or to help shape, like you say, your identity and keep you in touch with that, is awesome.
Yeah.
Because I think too much we can define ourselves by our work. That's just sort of how our culture is. If you don't work, that's where your value is defined. And that becomes so much of your identity. But what happens when you're not at work? And so that's a great way to keep in touch with that. I think that's awesome. I think that's really cool.
So I actively now try not to ask people, so what do you do for a living? Or
Right.
I think it never leads anywhere productive anyways. Very rarely do you want to know about your food scientist chemist guy. That's not something you're probably going to connect on necessarily. Maybe it is. And so I just find it's never a question starter that kind of leads you into a fruitful conversation. But having these other things, and they don't always have to be just for small talk. I mean, having these things for just basic, even going to a guy's fishing weekend, what are the things that are getting you excited in life right now that you can share, and maybe somebody else finds interest in, or maybe even somebody has a skill and they could teach you how to do that, or what's going on in the world, and how can what are your opinions about it, and how can you see it getting solved? And just having those conversations and just being educated and thoughtful about those things can help in relationships that have been long-standing for a long, long time. So I don't think it's just a small talk tool. I think it's an overall personal identity tool that I think helps me grow outside of, being able to sell my resume to an employer. I know it's not selling, you're not trying to sell yourself to other people, but in a way you kind of are at the same time.
Yeah.
So
you're selling yourself to connect. Look at it that way, whatever. That's not a bad thing when you're trying to, become friends or develop connection with others. It's an important thing. I think it's a great tool. That's amazing. What a cool concept.
Yep.
So I was thinking about my second one is culture. And the difficulty in that at my job, at my work, culture has been so bad for so long. And I think in my career as an educator, there was a time when my building and my culture was amazing. It was so much fun. And somehow through the course of time over the last 10 years, that's changed and come to a point where it's really bad working conditions and the culture of it. And what's happened is there's now all these little cultures through the building where people, I think, are seeking solace because the greater culture is so awful. And it's unfortunate and it's sad. And I've discovered that no matter how much I try to change, it's too big for me to do on my own. And so there's a lack of control that I have in that. And that it falls mostly on the responsibility of a leadership team to create a culture in an organization. And when that's not done, the lack of value that the people within that organization feel. And that's been such a big thing that I've experienced. And it's been such a big part of, I think, my demise and my worsening attitude towards education and my job of being a teacher. And I think there's a lot of teachers that feel the same way, because it's not just within a school building. I think the overall culture of education in and of itself has been damaged so much. And then I look at the bigger political culture, and I look at our culture of our society and how divided it is, and just how out of my control that stuff feels sometimes. And it just feels awful. It doesn't feel good. And I think the profound discovery that I can only control me and what I do and my actions around this, as much as idealistic as teachers tend to be. We want to change the world. We want to affect all these kids, right? I want to have this impact. And we're just idealistically grand in what our expectations are. And I think through the course of experience and time, the discovery that as much as I want it, there's other aspects that are keeping me from that. And that's when I have to do something else. And that discovery of culture, and culture has played such a big part of it. Yes, on my building level, but yes, on a bigger scale too. What can I control in order to make what I want in this, whatever I have left of my life? And so that has become a real profound discovery for me. And I don't think it's anything earth shattering. I think a lot of people are coming to grips with that kind of realization, but surrounding myself and building my own culture within my family, within my friends, within our business. That's a big thing for us, is building a culture and a community that's welcoming. And I take that into not just my work and education, but into the realm of fishing. There are times when I go into a fly shop and I am purposeful and intentional in asking a lot of questions to feel it out, to see what the culture of that shop is like. And if it's not in alignment with what I feel a good community should have, I'm not buying anything. I'm not giving them my business. I'm looking elsewhere. And that's what I can control. I can't control the way they make me feel when I walk in there. Because a lot of times fly shops can be elitist. They can feel that way. They can feel not very welcoming. And so that's how I can maybe control more of that and build my own world and community around that. And I think that's a big thing for us in starting this GFW venture, is creating a really welcoming culture and community. And that's what we want. I think first and foremost, that's like a big variable for us, is that feeling of, man, this is a good culture to be a part of.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of things you said. Obviously, I'm not a teacher, but I can imagine being in a culture where it does feel sort of kind of fragmented, and you start to silo out and find your little niches and things of that nature, that it can be very defeating. And I do think in a lot of ways it's something that's kind of plagued the US and the world in a way of and there's a lot of varying factors to that. But just of finding your own little niche that works for you, or maybe even not even finding a niche at all and being kind of segmented away from other people. And I think the culture and the community that we want to create is one that kind of tries to dissolve those barriers a little bit and brings people together again, and in any way that you can, whether it's a small weekend of 2 people, small weekend of 6 people, a giant convention one day maybe we'll be able to do, I don't know, but just bringing people together again to kind of rub shoulders and talk and try and dissolve those false barriers that have been created. Just because I don't think that we do enough of that. We're not forced to, we're not encouraged to. We have other obligations in life that are forcing us not to. We find the things that we like to listen to, or we like that validate our own experiences and our own thoughts, rather than trying to challenge them. And all those things are a function of us just really getting comfortable in a place. And I think we're all driven to find comfort. I think that's just the nature of being alive, is like you want to be comfortable. And I think a lot of the best things in life, like bushwhacking up a mountain, a lot of the best things in life don't come with comfort.
Right. And I think that's huge. I can control, the things that I can do. I can be more friendly on the water when people are around, and I talk to people. I'm happy to share things that are going on when I'm out. But yeah, that's the only way that we're going to get better, grow, whatever, is through challenge when it's difficult and getting outside of that comfort. I don't want to be segmented into just this little thing and always be there. I want to be out. I want to, and so those are the things that I agree that you have to be challenged in order to get through some of that stuff. But that discovery of like, okay, I can't do this on my own, that was kind of a big one for me. And I just think that culture is such an important part. It makes us feel valued when we're, a part of a culture that nurtures some of that thought. My own thoughts matter, and what I do matters. And you may not agree with it, but it's who I am, and we can still get along. We can still hang out. We can still be, you know what I mean? So those things are important. And I think that all stems from that culture.
Well, and I would also just to put a bow on it is, I know you feel like you can't do it on your own, but you probably can't. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't try to continue to, you shouldn't just throw your hands up and say the whole thing's shit. But you got to try and you got to keep showing up and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm sure of it.
Absolutely. All right. Last one.
Let's get to my favorite on my list.
Yes.
So this is a quote. So I've been using this running app called Nike Run Club, and the head coach, audio coach on that, or I think he's the head coach for all of Nike running, but his name's Coach Bennett, and he is wise and funny and humorous and accompanies me along on these runs in my years. And he said a quote on one of the guided runs that really resonated with me, and I think will resonate with what we're trying to do here. And it'll resonate with you because you're an English teacher, and it uses, the what do you even call these things? The
nouns, verbs, and adjectives. They're parts
what do you call them?
Parts of speech.
Parts of speech. Yes.
Part of sentence structure.
Sentence structure.
That make communication possible.
Right. And this was just a profound shift in my mindset. But the quote is, fill your life with great verbs. That will surround you with the right nouns. Do that, and you will live a life that merits the best adjectives. I thought it was awesome in the sense, I think a lot of us go along kind of floating through things. We wake up, go to work, get our paycheck, watch Netflix, go to sleep, and we float through just doing things every day. We don't put enough effort into creating great verbs in our life.
Which is the actions of life. Right.
And it's, I think it goes beyond just going through the motions. It's really putting an effort into creating big, bold adventures and memories and stories. And it's hard. It's not easy to set up and create these things. It's not easy to create a guy's fishing weekend that's lasted for 28 years. It's not easy to, get away for a week and go down to Mexico and go deep sea fishing. It's hard. I mean, you have to plan these things, but you do have to be intentional about it. And with that comes the great nouns in your life. Those nouns being people and memories and experiences. Like, those things come with you putting in the effort of doing the best verbs you can, and you'll get the best people out of it. And with that, kind of to sum it all up, you get the best descriptors of your life. At the end of it all, you hope that you have a bunch of people at your funeral talking about how amazing and wonderful of a life that you lived. And just those adjectives and descriptors of what you did with your life are so important. That's the roadmap.
That's it right there.
Right there.
You want everybody at your funeral to say, he was epic.
Epic.
Best adjective out there.
That's the one.
You hit the heartstrings here with the English teacher and the grammar nerd. That is the Nike dude. Absolutely. Coach Bennett hit a bomb right there. Knocked it out of the ballpark. I think about I'll go back to my last topic. There's a difference between going to work and engaging in work. they're go versus engage in terms of verbs. When you think about the quality of verb in teaching writing to my students, that's the stuff I try to hammer home. But to put it on a life roadmap like that's a phenomenal analogy to make, especially for an educator and grammar dork like myself. So kudos to you on that. That's a phenomenal thing right there. That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. Too bad you can't use it on your kids. No, you can't. Yeah. I mean, you don't have enough time now. It's
Yeah. I got 8 weeks left.
You got 8 weeks. 8 weeks to figure out how to jam that into a couple hundred kids' mind.
I'll use it on my own kids and parenting. Perfect. They'll be the beneficiary. That's a goodie, Ed. That's a great one.
Thanks, man. That was a good quote it's almost tattoo worthy, and I don't have any tattoos. So
right. Yeah, I don't either. It might be a little longer one, but yeah, that's a goodie. That would be tattoo worthy. That's a great segue into mine, which is a book, which is my favorite book.
It's a good book.
It's my favorite book. And it's called The River Why by David James Duncan, who is one of my favorite writers because of how funny he is. He brings humor to things that are serious and contemplative, and he has a way of storytelling that hits home for me. It connects with me for whatever reason. But The River Why is a classic coming of age story of the young Gus Orveston, which is a great name, but his search for meaning in his life, which he thinks is fishing, and his love of water and his connection and passion for it. And the story, it tells the story of him with a respectful rebellion of what your society dictates you're supposed to do. He graduates high school and he's like, screw college, I'm not doing that, even though his father wants him to. And he's like, I'm going to go get a fishing cabin on the side of a river and live my days fishing from dawn till dusk. And he sets out to live the life of a fisherman and what he thinks will bring value to him. And he's so wrong in what brings him value. And I think there's so many parallels to those things that Gus goes through that I went through in a lot of ways. I didn't leave home to go be a fisherman, but I went to college because it was what you were supposed to do. And I fumbled my way through and took forever and was a ski bum and just tried to find meaning in these different things. And it never happens the way that you expect it to or want it to or hope to a lot of times. And so Gus's discovery, I think, is a beautiful one because it comes at, he expects himself to go be a hermit, basically, and not interact with anybody. And it's just going to be me in the water and I'll just fish. And what he finds is loneliness, and what he finds is confusion. And it's in the people that he lets into his little world where he starts to make discoveries of value. In the family that lives up the river a little bit, they have these little kids, and he takes them fishing and the disaster that it is. But these kids teach him these little kids with zero boundaries and the questions they ask and everything. And it's those kinds of things that are real life that we find value in places that we never expect to find. And I think that's the part of the book that's so amazing. And the scene where he meets his future female soulmate is one of the best scenes in any book ever. Because it's every fisherman's fantasy of when you stumble across a woman skinny dipping and she's beautiful and he's so taken with it that he can't even speak complete sentences because he's such a dork. And then she leaves and he dreams about her and blah, blah, blah. And then later on, he ends up connecting with her. It's just the funniest thing ever. But it literally is like a fly fisherman's fantasy of, stumbling upon something of such beauty. So, there's so many things about the book that are amazing. If you're a fisherman, certainly you'll love it. As an educator, I love it because I teach a lot of coming of age stories. And so this one's a really good one for an adult audience. But it's a great book. My favorite of all time. I read it every year. My wife thinks I'm crazy. Haven't you already read that book 10 times? But I'm going to read it a 300th time. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful story. So, and I think there's just personal connection to me. So it makes it awesome.
It's a good book. You recommended it to me. I probably read it 3 years ago, and it is a goodie. It's got a lot of humor. I can see why you read it. I've read it multiple times too, just because it has so many different sort of storylines and such. But it's a goodie. It's a good one for this bookshelf for sure.
Right on. Yeah, I've recommended it to a bunch of people, and I think it's, some people who don't fish kind of get bored with it. Can get wordy in some spots, but it's just a phenomenal story. I love it, and all the fishing stuff, and it's great. So that makes it easier for me.
You have to take it with a little bit of he's got a certain style about his writing that you definitely have to take with I want to say a grain of salt, but you have to take with a grain of something to appreciate.
Yeah. It's wonderful. He's a great writer.
He is. Awesome, man. Well, that was 3 things we all brought to the table today.
I liked it. Good stuff. Yeah. Good. Right on, bro.
We're going to get a new tattoo now.
Off to the tattoo artist.
We'll see you next week to show off our new tattoos.
Excellent. Love it.
All right, man. Brother. Well, I love you.
I love you too. We'll talk soon.
See ya.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening. Make sure to visit our website, guysfishingweekend.com, to check out the GFW merch, sign up for our newsletter, and learn how to get involved with the community. We appreciate you spending even a little bit of your week with us and are glad to have you along on the journey. Stay legendary and happy fishing.